Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And today I'm joined by Elizabeth. Elizabeth, can you share a little bit about yourself and what you do and what your company does?
Sure thing. Yeah. Elizabeth Cole, and I'm the head of human resources for a company called Cambia Health Solutions. We basically go to market as the Blues. So, Blue Cross and Blue Shield. We are in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Utah. So we're essentially a healthcare insurance company.
Excellent. Tell me a little bit more about what you are doing in the realm of flexible work and what you see as its benefits.
Well, Cambia was doing was utilizing flexible work arrangements before the COVID, kind of landed on the world. And so a large portion of their organization already was working remotely. Many of the folks in the call centers and then some other people like actuaries and underwriters and others like that had already been employing some of it. And then once the pandemic hit, I think it really just made that expand in a way. So now what we're kind of grasping with, if you will, is I think what everybody is thinking about right now in the world of post-pandemic and what's the right mix, what's the right balance of hybrid being in the office versus having the benefits, the many benefits of also being able to work from home.
So tell me a little bit more about what you're seeing as the benefits of flexible work versus the benefits of being in the office.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, a big benefit and frankly, almost a competitive disadvantage is if you don't offer some level of hybrid work, I think it's a real recruitment disadvantage. Yeah. And so the fact that we are able to offer, in some cases, fully remote and in some cases, a hybrid structure for a lot of roles that we are recruiting for right now, that gives us the ability to hire. And in some cases, for some roles, frankly, we tried, trying to have it come back into the office, at least for the period of training. And we got far less people being interested in the roles. And so it's just a reality today that people are wanting to have this flexibility. And so it's a recruitment tool. It's also a retention tool because people have come to, enjoy the benefits of both. The second thing is really when you think about satisfaction and engagement, the ability to work in remotely is signaling to the other individual that I trust you, right? I'm going to trust you and you're going to have, what I guess I would call agency over your life a bit more than maybe you would have if you were required to come into the office full time. And, I think that is something that's very, very important to people as we've all begun to rethink our priorities, what's important to us in our lives. Right. And so, one of the key components literally of happiness is having agency over your life. And I think that a hybrid working structure enables that agency for people. And that leads me to the third benefit of it, I think truly is productivity. Now, you don't have productivity in every case, which we can talk about the downsides of some of these arrangements. But I do think that there's productivity when people can, kind of join portions of their life, get what they need to get done, go and do the other parts of their lives and carry a bit less stress around that. You obviously eliminate the commute time. And I think the sweet spot again is that coming into the office from time to time and then working from home. I do believe that in some cases, I'm not positive about this. I don't have evidence around it, but I think that for me, at least, and for others that I've spoken with, that if I were full-time at home, it would be, I think, mentally draining. Whereas I think if I work a couple of days from home, a couple of days in the office, that it's actually both cases more energizing.
Oh, interesting. So on that topic specifically, so I've helped 26 companies figure out their hybrid and remote work arrangements, and actually done some studies on that last question of what happens with energy. And it really depends on personality. So if you use the big 5 personality factors, so you'll see that people who are extroverted, they tend to have difficulty if they have to work all the time remotely. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of one example. Whereas people who are introverted have much less difficulty with working full-time remotely. So that's kind of one aspect of personality. Another aspect is conscientiousness. So conscientiousness is another one of those big 5 factors. And so people who are highly conscientious have much less trouble working full-time remotely, whereas people who are lower on the conscientiousness spectrum, they benefit from others around them, kind of motivating them and energizing them and getting them to be as productive as they can be. So those are, and there are a couple of other things that are going on there. So for example, people who are neurotic have a little bit more difficulty working more remotely because they're, neurotic. Neurotic is people who are a little bit emotionally less stable. So people who, that's kind of a neurotic, is the technical term for that as part of the big 5. Yep. So they benefit from others around them to help them be more emotionally stable. So
that all makes real good sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So it really does depend on personality. I'm curious if you've done some personality, a number of companies use things like the Big 5 or MBTI or DISC predictive index. Have you done anything in terms of internal personality assessments and correlating that with people's performance in remote hybrid roles?
We do one of those assessments, primarily something that's most like DISC, I would say. I think it's more of a color-based one. And then there's others that we use in smaller groups, MBTI and things of that nature. We haven't, as an entire company, looked at it like that, but I do know that on smaller teams, that there's people are working together to understand and appreciate the that people have, and that's one way of understanding that person is kind of, knowing a little bit more about what their preferences are, and what we try to do and pay attention to, because inclusion is one of our really important values in the company, is to make sure that for those people that don't tend to speak up as much, and yet those can be the people that have very, very good ideas, and we miss it if we don't really pay attention to it, is this notion of what someone shared with me taught me one time was take space, make space. So for the people that tend to talk more, maybe make a little bit of space for those that don't talk, but then that's incumbent on people that don't always talk much to take that space, right? So we try and be very explicit about that and be cognizant of those dynamics.
That's helpful. You might want to take a look at the correlations between people's personalities and measurements and the remote hybrid work, how those work out, because that might be something useful for you as you're thinking about this. And to add to the last point, the other point that you're making in terms of people's taking space, making space, I find that it's quite helpful to have some asynchronous communication for people who have more difficulty expressing themselves, people who tend to be introverted, people who tend to be more pessimistic / realistic, and who may be a little bit worried about what people think, and they need to take the time to think through their ideas before expressing themselves. So rather than having just a brainstorming session, to have some time for people to think about ideas and can make their contributions in advance and have some more preparation for them. I'm curious what you've been finding.
Oh, 100%. And we really are starting to understand the fact that there's many introverts in the world. Many leaders are actually introverts, but they've had to sort of forcibly overcome that in order to lead and almost like follow the model of what a leader looks like. So I love what you said about, no, let's actually take the time to get the information in advance so people have a chance to think about it more deeply and not just off the cuff, because frankly, that does lead to better thinking and decision and conversations, as if it's not just a very surface understanding of something and something you've had 5 seconds to think about. So, but thank you for that, because I'm going to think about deploying that or employing it a bit more often than we probably do.
Excellent. Let me go back to the point you raised about the benefits. And I think I'm really glad that you mentioned trust, showing trust as a benefit. I think that's something that a lot of leaders have difficulty. There was a Microsoft research showing that 87% of leaders have difficulty being confident that their workers are productive when they're working remotely. And I'm curious what you do to make sure that you, and talking about some of the challenges of remote work, that you do hold people accountable when they are working remotely, whether they're in a hybrid setting or a fully remote setting. what do you do to make sure that they are performing? How do you solve that challenge?
Yeah. It's before this role, I had a global role. So I had almost all of my team did not live with me, near me, right? I had people on every continent, if you will, I would say, except maybe Antarctica. And so I was never near them, but I remember being very often when I had to talk to large groups of people, I would say to them, and it might have sounded like blasphemy, but I said, look, if somebody on my team can show me how they can very effectively do their job in 25 hours, I want them to show me how to do it. Like, I think this notion of you've got to work 40 hours, 50 hours, 60 hours, whatever the case may be, is very antiquated and very much steep. And I gotta have my eyeballs on you. And it's actually a bit of a lazy leadership model because basically what it's saying is, I need you to be sitting right there because I don't exactly know what to tell you to do, but when I figure it out, I need you to be right there. We really ought to be thinking about what is the value that you bring that I need you to deliver, and be very precise and not put you in a box, like give you the opportunity to expand your creative thinking around how to solve problems and how to approach challenges. But at the end of the day, you've got a set of responsibilities to deliver on and projects to complete, etc. And if you do that, I don't actually care when you do it. I do care how you do it. In other words, like collaboratively and bringing people along and that sort of thing. But I don't much care if you've figured out a way to do it in less hours. In fact, I kind of love that you figured out a way to do it in less hours. So I think that it's a very old way of thinking about people sitting in their seats, and this notion of you got to be the first one to be in the office and the last one to be in the office. It's like, people were shoe shopping online in the office, well before COVID hit. And,
That's true.
So
anyway. No, it's a good point. It's a very factory model way of thinking about knowledge work. But it's interesting and I'm curious specifically what you use to measure, because what the typical approach to performance measurement is that once annual performance management, performance measurement, that evaluation, which doesn't work really well with what you're talking about, with holding people accountable in a constant way of evaluating how well they're performing. What I do with my clients is usually have small scale frequent performance evaluations introduced to complement that once annual performance evaluation. So once a week, every 2 weeks, once a month, depending on the worker and the roles, to have the manager and the employee just set 3 to 5 goals and then see how well at the next meeting, how well they accomplished the goals, coach them on problem solving, and then set 3 to 5 goals until the next week or 2 weeks or month, tied to those broader KPIs or OKRs, whatever you happen to be using. So I'm curious what specific tactics you're using, if not the once annual performance evaluation, to make sure that people are achieving those outcomes.
Yeah, that's very impressive what you do. It's really, really good and quite disciplined. As a company, we ask that managers meet with their employees on a quarterly basis so that we also don't have that annual, kind of surprise and uncomfortable thing, because it's uncomfortable for the manager, it's uncomfortable for the employee, because we just didn't get used to having those conversations, right? I mean, the way to get better at these things is to actually do them more frequently. I would say that I use those check-ins more with my team to just say, how do you think things are going? How are you doing against your projects? What are you needing from me? How is your team doing? Because these are all leaders of others. But the main way that I tend to drive performance for my function is we build out a 3-year roadmap on what do we want to achieve? What do we want to look like what do we want the business to look like? What do we want HR to look like? What do we want to build in 3 years? And then work backwards from there to say, okay, then what does our 2024 operating agenda need to be? And it's a very focused, it's not long, it's 5-6 big things with measures and a name and an accountable party. And so we just check in every month to see how we're doing against it. And I find that that's been it's worked pretty well. We don't always hit everything that we set out to do, but I think that's okay, because if we did, maybe we weren't stretching hard enough, But we also, it's a way of holding because we're letting down the team. Like, it's not a person just like letting themselves down or me down. It's like, if they're not doing this, the HR team is not delivering on our promises and our commitments. So that's a bit more of how I would say I tend to manage performance.
Okay, so more team-based. Excellent. Good to know. Interesting. I like that approach. Now, another challenge that I've seen with hybrid work and remote work is how do you, and you kind of alluded to that, is how do you onboard and mentor and integrate junior staff? So that has definitely been a struggle, and a number of my clients have been struggling with it. And I'm curious what you are doing to solve that kind of challenge.
Oh gosh, it's a struggle. And I'm probably, right there amongst the people that you are talking to with that. We put a lot of emphasis on the onboarding process this past year, but I would say we focused more on managers and directors and helping it be not just like, are you getting what you need and all that, but like a business onboarding, so that they really got how the business work, the processes, the kind of unspoken rules, the methods that we use, what are the processes we use to run the business. But I will say that for our more frontline employees, that it has been something that we've struggled with. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that the supervisors and the managers have that personal touch with them, because they used to be able to walk around and just say good morning to everybody. And now, we're saying you've got to do that virtually and just do a quick check-in and how you doing, and be available on Teams, and establish buddies for them. Right. So that's one that I would say is a bit of a downside to the remote work, is that the connection that we all used to have to each other, our community, our social experiences were in the office. And then when the pandemic hit, that actually became our homes again. And so that magnetic pull, I think, is a bit more to the communities that people live in. So I do think it's been a challenge getting people back to feeling that social fabric of being with one another more often. But we're trying to be as thoughtful about it as we can. And so if you've got any more ideas for me, I would love to hear it as well.
Sure. So a couple of things worked that generally, and then for young junior staff. So generally for community building, what's been really helpful is having virtual coffee roulette, opt-in virtual coffee roulette, and then in-person lunch hour. So that's kind of really different than the larger events, the one-on-one activities. So where people are randomly matched, opt in to be randomly matched with other people across the company for half-hour virtual chat, where the company pays for their coffee to spend that time talking to each other. And then in-person lunch hour for people who live close enough to each other, or if they are coming to the office, to opt in randomly to be matched with somebody for, again, lunch hour. Company pays for lunch, and they spend that time one-on-one bonding randomly. So that forms really good connections across the company. I'm curious if you do anything like that.
Yes, we do. And we also do have more social events, so that we'll encourage people to come in like once a month in each of our buildings. But I do like this idea for the newcomers to be able to have more of a one-on-one with different people. So that's I'll follow up on that. Thank you. Great idea.
And then when you talk about buddies, and I find that when it's given to the supervisor, often they don't actually do that. They don't actually form those buddies. So having HR own a mentoring program is something that has been really a very powerful driver of getting the people who are there from 3 months to 3 years really integrated into the company. So having a mentor, and the mentoring program having 2 mentors, one from their own team and one from outside the team, because what people are losing especially is connections across the company. So having a mentor from outside their team is very helpful. So having that mentoring relationship from your own team and from outside the team with HR owning a mentoring program, that has also proved very helpful. So that might be useful for you as well.
Have you found that works at scale, or more with companies that are smaller?
No, at scale. I mean, I work Applied Materials. It's a 30,000 people company, as well as smaller companies. Yes, it absolutely works at scale. So that's why I'm saying HR has to own it. If you tell managers, some of them will do a good job, some of them won't do a good job, but HR, that's why you can kind of coordinate and you can track what's happening with each person. and see how they're doing. And then, of course, has to be monitoring of the program, and that's why HR can do surveys. So as part of the program, you do a survey, you see how well you're matched with your current mentor. And if your match is not going so well, you can give them some coaching on how to be a better mentor and mentee pair, or then you can reassign them. And so having that occasional surveys and reassignments and coaching and reassignments is really helpful. So kind of that really structurally integrates junior staff very well.
Very good.
Now, as we're coming up to the late end of the interview, I'm curious what you're thinking about in terms of the future of flexible work at your company. What's going to be the future? What's going to happen?
Well, for our company, I think that we've hit a nice sweet spot. I think that the one area that we would like to see more of is for people to be actually coming in more often, but not coming in to be doing this, right? Like, we don't want people to just come in and sit in an office or a cube and just be on a video all day. Like, and so we're trying to be quite thoughtful about and asking all the managers to say, think about when you have creative problem solving to do together, matters of strategy, planning sessions, anything like that, where it's much better to be in a room and be able to adopt the ideas of each other, or just even staff meetings, regular staff meetings, check-in meetings, but encourage your people to come in at the same time and have that connection. I do think when there's work that's really kind of challenging, thinking work that needs to be done collectively, it's way better to do that in person.
Yep.
Yeah. But I also, we're not going to go back to a 5-day a week or even a 4-day a week. I think the sweet spot's going to be 2-3 days in the office that we're going to encourage. We still have actually the majority of our people that are remote or come in like 1 or 2 days a month. And I don't see that changing massively, but for those people that are in the hybrid roles, which is 2 to 3 days a week, just making sure that we do make the most of that, of both being at home, but also being in the office. And I certainly get energized when I'm in the office, but I also do personally like to be able to be heads down and get a lot of stuff done at home as well.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense, Elizabeth. Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise. That was very helpful.
And I appreciate you sharing your learnings as well. So this was good for both of us. Pleasure to meet you. And,
pleasure to meet you as well. And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you checked out the show and leave a review. It helps others discover the show, and it helps us improve the show.